On today's edition of A Week in France, I'm pleased to welcome back Paul Smith. He's the head of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Nottingham. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Paul.
My pleasure.
We have a number of topics we're going to look at, but first let's begin with far-right leader Marine Le Pen and her allies who've accused the judiciary of a witch hunt. This after prosecutors requested she face a 5-year ban from public office if convicted of misusing EU funds, a charge that Le Pen and members of a national rally party deny and say is an attempt to keep the party from power. Camille Knight fills us in on the trial.
Since public prosecutors called for a 5-year ban from public office for France's Marine Le Pen, the far right has been up in arms. The motion laid out on Wednesday also requests a 5-year prison sentence and a €2 million fine for her party. The National Rally leader says it's a politically motivated attack.
The only thing the prosecution is interested in is Marine Le Pen, to ask once again for my exclusion from politics with immediate effect, and then the National Rally so they can ruin the party.
The National Rally's chairman, Jordan Bardella, was also quick to call the prosecution's demands an assault on democracy. And it's not just the far right. Former Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin also showed his support on social media, saying it would be shocking if Marine Le Pen were deemed ineligible and that fighting her should be done at the ballot box, not elsewhere. The European Parliament's lawyer has sought to point out what the case is really about: the embezzlement of public funds.
I mean, as far as the European Parliament is concerned, €4.5 million worth of funds have been embezzled, so it's their responsibility, not the responsibility of the European Parliament, not the responsibility of the public prosecutors.
Marine Le Pen is among more than 20 National Rally officials, including her father and sister, accused of hiring assistants who worked on party affairs between 2004 and 2016, rather than for the European Parliament, which paid them. Bans from public office have been sought against all the defendants. Their defence begins next week and will go on until the end of the month. A ruling is expected at the start of the year.
Let's bring back Paul Smith, who's been listening in to that with us. Paul, as we heard in that report just then, prosecutors have called for a 5-year ban from public office for Marine Le Pen. What more do we know about the charges and the likelihood of her conviction?
Well, we don't know how likely it is that she'll be convicted, but this is part of a very elaborate scheme that the Front National, the predecessor of the Rassemblement National, had run. The problem for the Front National was that it found it very difficult to get funding from banks in France, and often sought funding from banks elsewhere, particularly the Czech Republic and Russian banks as well. But when it was a very small party, it didn't really have very much in the way of income. It's doing much better now that it has 200 deputies in the National Assembly, but or a large number of deputies, sorry, in the National Assembly, but because of state funding. So it was always trying, it was sort of playing catch up to get funding. And one of the ways of doing that, or they thought that they could do and get away with it, according to the accusations, is to channel money from when they were in the European Parliament, when they had the European deputies, and move that money sideways. But that's what they're being accused of. And the whole system is a very elaborate system, but it looks like it might be about to collapse.
Now, this trial, of course, casts huge doubts on Le Pen's chances of running for president in 2027. But is her political career effectively over? And what does it mean then for Jordan Bardella, the young president of the National Rally Party?
Well, I think what we've seen with Donald Trump, let's make a comparison there, is that actually these trials, in some ways, someone like Le Pen can't really lose, because although she for years and years has claimed that all the other political parties are rotten. The French word pourri, they're all rotten, they're all corrupt. There's some great footage doing the rounds of her on a program where she's denouncing the right-wing party and Jean-François Copé back in the day. But the idea that everybody is corrupt, and now she's being accused of that, but actually they're trying to turn it round. This is what we see the extreme right doing, is that this is a system that's being used by the establishment against us. We are now the victims, and we're being targeted by a legal system completely irrespective of the fact that the law is the law, and this is a party that claims to stand for law and order, and yet when it's confronted with the law, actually doesn't like that law very much. But as we've seen in other instances, as I say, particularly in the United States, that doesn't actually necessarily do the party very much harm.
All right, we'll just have to wait and see the outcome of that trial in December, won't we? We're going to move away from politics and talk about something that is very on brand for France now. A new study by the French Institute of Health has revealed some new details concerning sexual practices of the French. It says that French people are having less sex, but that it's better than it used to be. Charlie James tells us more.
France, home of the City of Love, burlesque, and sex symbols such as Brigitte Bardot. But what are the sex lives of everyday French people like today? That's what a new study published Wednesday aimed to decipher. The French National Institute of Health surveyed more than 31,000 people between the ages of 15 and 89. And it found major changes in French sexuality over the past 10 years. The average age of first sexual intercourse has increased, now over 18 years old for women and nearly the same age for men. But while people are waiting longer to start having sex, the types of sexual activity people are engaging in has significantly diversified, with more people experimenting with masturbation, oral sex, and anal sex. And more people than ever are having same-sex experiences. Over 8% of women and 7.5% of men now report having had at least one same-sex partner. At the same time, people report having sex less often. Asked if they've been intimate with someone in the past 12 months, 77% of women said yes, a 6-point drop since 2016. And 81.6% of men said yes, a more than 7-point drop. So what's behind these changes in sexual behavior? The study cites societal upheavals such as the emergence of the Me Too movement and the COVID-19 crisis. Increased awareness and action against sexual violence and changing norms around consent have also made an impact.
So, Paul, a lot of interesting new stats there, a lot to digest. Are the findings surprising in your opinion, and is there anything in that report that stands out for you?
So, I mean, it kind of confirms the sort of view, the international view of the French as a nation of lovers. But obviously, these things change over time. Some interesting statistics there. I was looking a bit more deeply at the report that came out in Le Point this week, and there are some quite interesting distinctions between experiences between men and women. And I guess we might generally expect that to be the case. But also, it suggested that the trends in France are very similar to trends in Scandinavian countries. So perhaps the French aren't as exceptional as all that. But I was surprised that one of the underlying readings seemed to be that the French were having more sex, but not with the same partner, more sort of, for want of a better expression, sleeping around. But I suppose that kind of confirms the stereotype of the French lover.
All right, now we're going to do a complete pivot from talking about sex to the Virgin Mary now, because a medieval statue known as the Virgin of Paris has returned to Notre-Dame Cathedral. She makes her return 5 years later after the 2019 fire that engulfed the landmark. The stone sculpture is seen as a symbol of hope and faith for Catholics in Paris and beyond, and remained miraculously intact after the blaze. So we're coming back to you, Paul. First of all, what's so significant about the statue then?
Well, it's precisely as you say. I mean, she's one of a number of statues, or it's one of a number of statues that survived, objects in Notre Dame that survived this extraordinary fire. And of course, from that very moment, it's taken as a miraculous happening. And also, of course, the fact that she's the standing Virgin, the Stabat Mater, who stands at the foot of the cross, is a profound symbol of hope. So I don't think one has to necessarily be a card-carrying Christian to see in that. One could be quite secular and yet see in that a remarkable story of escape, a miraculous story almost, and a symbol of hope, and a broader. Again, we've discussed this before on previous programs, a broader kind of moment where we have this remarkable rebuilding of Notre-Dame, the national church in France, going to be opened only 5 years or just a little bit over 5 years since that horrific fire. That's really an extraordinary achievement. And then, of course, we have the, it has both a religious and I think also a secular symbolism to it.
So the Notre Dame's grand reopening is scheduled for December 8th. It's been, the subject of much international attention, hasn't it? Almost remarkably so.
Yes, well, as I say, it is sort of the national church. I remember talking to a lot of English friends, British friends at the time of the fire, who couldn't quite get their heads around what exactly was happening, and this extraordinary emotional response by people who are not necessarily, who have no faith necessarily, but in France they felt that this is where, for example, de Gaulle and the resistance celebrate the liberation of Paris in 1944. Insofar as there is a national church in the secular republic, it's Notre-Dame de Paris. So it's the actual fire itself is overwhelming. The rebuilding of the cathedral is more than just a religious reopening. It is, as you say, a national event, and the president will be there. And it will be, a reconfirmation of the importance of Notre Dame as a national church, but also the Church of Paris, and also a symbol of the people. Let's not forget, Notre Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo really underlines that idea of Notre Dame as a people's church.
A truly national event indeed. Paul, thank you so much indeed for joining us on the roundup of A Week in France. We appreciate your input as always. You're watching France 24. We'll be back in just a few moments. Stay with us.
Mihai and Teofil are methane hunters.
You want to check that one right there? Because
the
it
tanks.
seems, like it's new.
Pour travailler, j'utilise une caméra à imagerie optique des gaz. Là, on voit la quantité de gaz est assez importante en fait, parce qu'on est plutôt loin et pourtant je le vois très très clairement. It's venting from the hatch. It's venting from the top of it.
According to the IPCC, methane is responsible for nearly half the rise in global temperatures. It's now a race against the clock to reduce its impact. Methane, a climate time bomb, on France 24.